Happy to welcome our first guest this morning. Senator Daniel Sparks joins us in studio. He represents parts of Itawamba, Prentiss, and Tishomingo counties in the Senate. Senator, good morning.
Good morning, Richard. Good to be with you.
Good to be with you as well. A lot going on. 3 weeks into this new legislative session, I spoke with one of your colleagues last week, and one of the things that we talked about, week 2, week 3, in terms of what the public consumes, feel a little more quiet. It feels like there's a lot of behind-the-scenes work going on, a lot of committee meeting work, before we really get out onto the floor and are doing a ton of debating, and people are really kind of locked in on everything that's going on. Tell us what's happening behind the scenes right now.
That's very fair. Your first deadline is a drafting request deadline where you ask the drafting office, hey, I've got this particular bill, save me a slot. Then quickly thereafter is the date to drop that bill, meaning you need finalized language. And so what happens oftentimes, and I hate that it works this way, but it just really does, is you will drop a bill and the language may not be just perfect. There may be some people that have worked on a bill for a year. There are some people who get handed a bill from some organization that says, hey, this is a really conservative piece of legislation. We're running it in several states. You get model legislation, if you will. And then they all get dropped in the hopper and they get assigned a committee. And people start reading them. You know, the short titles, people say, oh, this is what the bill does. And then you actually have to read the bill to see if that's what it does. But then you end up with committee work. You got to get your bill out of committee, and that's the deadline coming up a week from today. And oftentimes, and some of my bills will be subject to this, it's a committee substitute. So by the time you get to the committee, you're going to say, hey, we've really looked at this, and here's some adjustment language that we're putting into the bill, or we've even just brought code sections forward so that we can have a bill. But those are the things that are going on right now, and a lot of times people get, I think, some unnecessary anxiety because their bill gets some negative attention or gets double referred, or things of that magnitude, but we're just kind of figuring that out. But that's really what's going on now is and I'll be working today. I've got some legislation that I've really got to work on some language for the next few days so that I can present it to committee. Because if not, you end up passing something through committee that you have to tell everybody, hey, this is not the finished product. And then you have a floor substitute, and that gets a little tougher just because people don't have as much time to look at it. So right now, people are really trying to read bills, and as a chairman, I'm trying to read all the bills that are in my committee, and as a vice chairman, work with Chairman Fillingame at Judiciary B and go through what are a long list of bills in Judiciary B and kind of see what can work and what can't. And for instance, in Judiciary B, there are either 4 or 5 bills about squatting, you know, someone being in your home, a rental home, or even a home they have no rights to be in. And just because 5 people dropped a bill, we won't pass 5 bills. So I think that happens more often than people realize, and sometimes we get our feelings hurt or we get upset because our bill maybe is not the one that gets selected. But at the end of the day, we're just trying to get the right legislation out there.
You had a front row seat last week for a hearing that, generally speaking, people would just say is innocuous, right? Just a budget hearing. Going through budgeting items. The State Auditor was there. Senator Polk was there. To call that a war of words might be a bit of an understatement. Would you do us a favor and take us inside that room as you watched it unfold last week?
Well, I'll say this to start with. That was an appropriations meeting, and I'm on finance, so I was not even supposed to be in the room. I was there because Mississippi Development Authority was presenting right before that group, and I came in to listen as Chair of Economic and Workforce Development, and so I was just sitting at the table. And, you know, the interchange in the back and forth, the questions, there's reasonable questions. I think there were reasonable points made. What's not reasonable is that everybody in there is a Republican. You kind of forget that at times, but people are passionate about what they do. And the auditor, first of all, he's a very smart guy. Clearly went to Harvard and went to Oxford to study, both Oxfords actually. I was at Ole Miss while the State Auditor was also there. And he's very passionate about...
But also Oxford, England.
That's right. Yes, that's why I said both Oxfords.
Yeah.
But I only got to one. I got to the one in Mississippi. But the concern, I think, is, and I've worked with the auditor's office on legislation the first couple of years, is that as we kind of work through the process, people begin to state their identity. And his identity has been, to a great degree, that I've recovered more money than anybody in the state of Mississippi. And he has. I think the numbers support that. But how you do it matters. There's also the concern of people, and this is not the first state agency that there's been a question of how they spent their funds or what they were doing. And many times the leaders of those agencies are former legislators. But I wish the dialogue could have been better. I think it could have been better. And I don't like to call somebody a liar, especially if they're asking me a question, even if it's based on information that may not be accurate. And I certainly don't mind a fellow defending his position if he says, "Hey, I didn't do that," but it was way too personal to me. And it's regrettable. I mean, this must be what Democrats felt like 25 years ago when they had every slot in state government. So, here we are with a supermajority and with all 8 statewide offices, and we can do better. We can do better than this.
So I can't help but take a look at this bill yesterday. And look, I think the state auditor, there is fault there with some of the decorum in terms of delivery. But I also can't help but look at the lieutenant governor and feel like there's some pettiness that's going on. We get the introduction yesterday of David Parker's bill, Senate Bill 2847, that is stripping or proposing to strip a lot of the power that exists with the state auditor's office from that office. And Shad White had a press release yesterday, and he was pretty bombastic in the press release when he said, at a time when President Trump is cutting government fat, Mississippi's swamp creatures and establishment politicians are trying to stop me from finding waste and theft of taxpayer funds. You may as well call this the Mississippi Corruption Act of 2025. That was a direct quote from a press release from the state auditor's office. So I know both. It's clear that neither the lieutenant governor nor the state auditor like each other. And to your point about everybody being Republicans, there's seems to be infighting and getting along. For Mississippians across the state that are listening to this right now, I feel like there are a lot of people rolling their eyes and they're saying, when are the games going to stop between statewide elected officials? As someone who sits in that Senate chamber, do you understand that question? And is there an end to this back and forth between the auditor's office and the lieutenant governor's office?
Well, I think, of course, I'll let them speak for themselves as it relates to that, including, hey, I can drop any bill I want to. And I think people overestimate how many bills are dropped based on somebody saying, hey, go drop this bill so we can be petty. I haven't talked to Senator Parker about his bill or what his background was on that bill. I'd let him answer for that. But I think you brought up an interesting point. We got a lot of people that across the board are looking at what's happening next and not dealing with what's happening now. So if people are frustrated, I don't blame them. I think that's a very reasonable reaction to have to politics. I think also the more we Washingtonize politics in the state of Mississippi, the worse it is for our people and elected officials. So
I think that's a good point. I've never heard it described that way, as Washingtonizing.
I think I made that
there's
up.
Something to that. Well, you know what? I'm going to let you. I'll let you coin that phrase and hold on to it.
But in all seriousness, these sharp barbs that we're throwing back and forth, whether it's on social media or anything else, the proper response to a terrible bill is to go talk to the author. Last year I had a bill, and God bless Paul, he really didn't like my bill. He repeatedly told me he didn't like my bill. Just come tell that to someone. So my first response, and the auditor may have done this, but my first response would have been going to the author and said, hey, look, man, what's up? You realize how this is going to hurt our agency, and have that conversation. And, I guess it goes back to a little bit of biblical teaching that if you have an issue with your brother, go to them in private to start with. Maybe you can solve that in private. And if not, at some point, if you feel like you need to publicize that, but just drawing a conclusion that, hey, this bill drops and I don't like it, or it hurts my agency, therefore these things are true, is a little bit of too far of a leap. Additionally, it happens all the time. You come over there and you talk to people, and you know what? On the Senate side, if he didn't get traction, there's another end of the hall. He could go talk to people in the House, but often these bills, when they start, Sometimes they are attention getters. I've had that issue with MDOC. I have code sections open currently for Mississippi Prison Industries because I continually to be frustrated with what we see out of corrections and Mississippi Prison Industries. So their code sections are open just in case there needs to be some change. But yeah, I think we could do better trying to talk to one another a little bit more instead of talking to the public.
Quick time out, then we're going to continue our conversation with Senator Daniel Sparks. We'll talk income tax. We'll also talk about the Office of Workforce Development and what's going on during this legislative session on that front, the committee that he chairs. Back with you after this Gala Radio Show, SuperTalk, Mississippi.
It looks like I'm going to live. Now I go to the House of Representatives and they vote on me.
If they vote yes, what happens?
Then I go to the Senate and the whole thing starts all over again.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And if they vote for me on Capitol Hill, well, then I'm off to the White House where I'll wait in a line with a lot of other bills for the president.
You know, this is a linear progress for you. We know all the things that are coming for Senator Daniel Sparks down the line. Maybe.
Oh, it's beautiful.
I'm not going to lie. I wonder where Lance finds some of these things. Maybe he tells me, he's like, hey, I got this coming back. I'm like, what are you talking about? So here we go. Daniel Sparks is our guest. Senator represents District 5, Itawamba, Prentiss, Tishomingo counties in northeast Mississippi. Certainly appreciate your time this morning. Let's switch gears and talk a little bit about what is going on in your particular committee, Workforce Development. That has been, I feel like we've just talked about it over and over and over, whether it's with Empower, and we're going to do that later, the focus on economic development and how workforce development plays a role in that. Is there a particular bill, or are there a couple that this year are going to be significantly impactful if they make it all the way through?
I think that, first of all, thank you, and thank you for having me today, because it's always enjoyable to talk about things that are good, and we have seen a lot of good in the state of Mississippi with economic investment, economic development over the last few years, and we've talked about this before with our site prep work with MDA and through the governor's office, and we've landed a lot of employers. What we need are employees that are trained to benefit in those jobs and raise their earning capacity, and so that's what we've really focused on. We continue to work with Accelerate Mississippi to get the mix right. We've talked about our career coach program, driving people to the right programs. There is a lot of legislation this year that will talk about the funding piece, whether it's at the K-12 level with CTE classes or whether it's at the community college level. So I think that those are extremely important. We have a bill this year, and because in the Congress last year they did not reauthorize the WIOA bill, which deals a lot with your workforce programs, but I think they will this year, that will allow us, you'll hear something called the one-door policy, and that's where the state of Mississippi hopefully will do a better job communicating with one another when it relates to someone who's receiving government benefits through the state, that we're also making certain that they're set up for a pathway of success to have training or to have educational opportunities, and basically that we're not setting up a benefit system that continually keeps people at some level but pushes them to get to the next level. Utah has done this since 97. It's not been allowed since 99, but there's been a carve-out, and Louisiana is pursuing an exemption. I think Mississippi will do the same. So it is set up as a task force/study committee. That's something that's come through our committee this year, but I'm excited about what that can be in working together with our friends across the state, but making sure that we're not working in silos. I think that happens so often in government. If we're not careful, everybody's in their own silo. We're getting, drawing down some federal money over here, federal money over there, state dollars to match it, and then we end up having duplicative services, but we're not actually getting it in the right manner. So I think that will be very helpful to our workforce, and it's why Accelerate was created to a great degree.
We get a question on the C-Spire text line that I think goes along with that. How can community colleges work with smaller schools? And I assume that they mean at the K through 12 level, more at the high school level, to get additional VOTEC classes. And I know VOTEC is a word that we've kind of phased out and used marketing phrases to make that a sexier idea. But the idea behind, automotive, building, culinary, et cetera, specialized classes for younger people in conjunction with community colleges.
That's certainly happening. It's a discussion. There's something Etowah Community College talks about middle college. There's a change in the way education is delivered than when I came through. It was very structured. You did, K through 12, then you maybe did community college, you did university. Now there's a lot of overlap, and one of the biggest struggles, and talking with our community college partners, it is a funding mechanism because they have expertise, they have equipment, they have other things that we don't need to replicate or try to replicate at the K-12 level just because a lot of this technology is very expensive. The equipment is very expensive. So what we are trying to do is find a way that they can partner, but again, it boils down to funding, and the state has to get it right to deliver the dollars to whomever is actually providing the service. And I think that's the biggest struggle in both the K-12 and the community college. You've got a lot of good people there that are trying to make this work, but I don't blame the community college or K-12 for saying, we want to offer this. You say you want this trained workforce, but you've got to put money toward it. Like we can't lose money. And if you talk to the community colleges, each of them actually lose money on CTE-style training because the classes are so much smaller because you have to have a certain amount of detail and attention on some of these specific trades. You can't put 65 people in a classroom. You may have 6. So the instructor cost goes up dramatically. So we're trying to work with that. Lieutenant Governor has been focused on the last dollar style scholarship. I'm really trying to lean on last dollar for these high wage, high demand, priority sector jobs, not just anything I want to go take, but we want to motivate what we want, which means that we need to fund what we're trying to produce.
Daniel Sparks, Senator for District 5, is my guest this morning. Gallo Radio Show, Super Talk, Mississippi. Let's turn our attention to the most frequently asked question so far in this legislative session, and that's where's the Senate's bill? And, of course, we're talking about income tax elimination. Obviously, the House spent a lot of time, leadership in the House spent a lot of time during the off-season months while not in session and just rolled out House Bill 1 just right out of the gate. We have heard over and over, well, there's a bill coming from the Senate, there's a bill coming from the Senate. When and what's that going to look like? And I know that's not in your lap, per se. You are not the author of the bill, but Senator Sparks, you're certainly involved with all that's going on there. What can you tell us in terms of update? Because I think there are a lot of people that have taken a stance that maybe the Senate is playing defense as opposed to being really aggressive. And forgive me for a long-winded question. Also, examining the House bill and what's in it and whether or not it's sustainable and trying to kind of figure out where changes need to be made or if the Senate is on board with it.
Well, I think that the first.
Sorry, I know there's a lot.
Oh,
there.
No, you're no worries. Very fair. The fact that the House chose to lead with HB 1 and push it as hard as they've pushed it is the prerogative of the House. I have utmost respect for the Speaker, the team over there, Chairman Lamar. And they're making a statement. The governor's made many statements. I think made one yesterday. Mm-hmm. Again, we're talking to the public on Twitter and Facebook and all these other things, which it's the application of pressure. Let's just call it what it is. I mean, there's an attempt to say, hey, if I get more thumbs up and likes and tweets and retweets and comments, I'm just going to read the bill. That's my answer. Instead of going back and tweeting something or putting something on Facebook, I'm going to read the bill. So part of it is digesting what HB 1 does. The other part is deciding where are we fiscally as a state coming out of the COVID pandemic. How much of the money that's been pressed down, federal money that will be spent through the end of 26, how much impact is that on our economy? And it's an interesting commentary when people say we meet every year. We do meet every year, and there's something that we will do this year as it relates to taxes. We're continuing to cut. We're in the middle of a tax cut. So the question, becomes what is the next thing to do? And the House's position, as I understand it, is elimination today, elimination now, elimination, elimination, elimination. And that is their position. I understand that clearly, and I respect that that's their position. Now,
let me interject just for a second,
sure.
Because it's elimination over time, though, right? There's a plan to do this in phases over a number of years. It's not cut to zero right out of the gate.
Well,
right?
and that's a good difference, because when I say elimination now, it appears they have to have the word elimination now. That's the problem, is that terms of years, I honestly believe if I walked in there and it becomes a question, are we playing chicken with taxes? So if I just walk in and say, okay, well, let's cut 0.0267% over 15 years, we'll completely eliminate the income tax in 15 years. That's the plan. It's eliminated. I think there would be people that signed off on it. Then the problem becomes all the people that got plussed up, all the industries, all the people that are looking at this tax bill, and let's just be honest, they're saying, am I benefiting from this? You know, they're rubbing their hands together going, am I coming out economically ahead? So they're for the plan. Well, you know, then they're not for that plan, because that eliminates the income tax, but it doesn't plus anybody up. It just gradually reduces the income tax. So that's why when you look at it, the question is, are we eliminating? We're currently eliminating. We're going to be down to a flat 4%. I think you will see us continue to propose to reduce, and I'm glad. I know we're up against. I hear the music in my ear, so either I'm imagining something or we're coming up on a break.
No, it's there. It's there. We've got a break coming up. Can you hang for the last?
Absolutely, be proud to.
For the end of the hour. We'll take a quick time out, and we'll pick this up with only about 5 minutes left with Senator Daniel Sparks on the other side of this break. I do think there is something that we've got to look at as well, because where's the revenue coming, but also are there new expenses that are coming that we're either aware of or forecasting that are not necessarily being accounted for, particularly as it pertains to Medicaid. We'll pick that up when we come back. Gala Radio Show, SuperTalk, Mississippi. C-Spire text line 601-879-4395. Mose says, I'm completely against House Bill 1 is written. Let any hiccup happen to the economy in the future, and all you will have accomplished is increasing the sales tax. Somebody says that the House equals children and the Senate equals adults. I'm just going to say that I'm not sure that I think, no, I'm not sure. I don't think that is a fair characterization. You got really smart people and really well-intentioned people on both sides that maybe look at a particular issue from different angles, but classifying the House, whether it's the elected officials or the leadership, as children, I think is a bit disingenuous as well. Senator Daniel Sparks is with us. By the way, it's not the first time I've heard it described that way, but I just don't agree with that.
No, I don't agree with that either. There's a lot of effort put into the work that's being done down there now. They're not only children, they're big boys and girls, men and women. So, you know, they can take criticism just like I hope I can take criticism. But if you look at HB 1 and you run the numbers out, one of the concerns I have is for the first 5 years, it's a net tax increase. I don't like the increase on the sales tax. Personally, I do understand from a fuel tax standpoint that we're funding roads with $87, and that ought to be a special fund. There should be a source of revenue. Do I think it ought to be a percent on the pump price? Absolutely not. I'm not sure if we're doing a tax on a tax or if they're taxing at 5%, not 5 cents, 5% of the price. Are you talking about the rack price or are you talking about the retail price? That means you would have an increase of approximately 15 cents a gallon. If gas gets back to $4 or $5, then you're going to have a quarter more, 25 cents.
It's 5 cents per dollar.
That's correct. So it's a 5% pure price. Now, here's the other thing. If our president does drill, baby, drill, and we see the price of gasoline go down, now all of a sudden you're trying to budget on a number that's uncertain. And we saw that, I think North Carolina went with this tax on gas as a sales tax on gas, and then they got away from that model because of the uncertainty of the revenue. So would you prefer just to see a flat increase in the excise tax at the state level and then use that money as opposed to a percentage increase? That's correct. And what we would do, and I've talked with the folks in the trucking industry, you've got to phase that in over time so that they can absorb it because they are in contractual relationships that have prices that are attached. But that's a piece that needs to be addressed. The other thing is you raise the sales tax, And as I understand it, it doesn't raise the use tax. Well, certainly you don't want to be in a position where if I walk into a shop in Oxford or in Belmont and it's 1.5% higher because we've raised the sales tax, but if you buy it on Amazon, it's 1.5 less. I'm not for putting Mississippians at a disadvantage to national or global conglomerates. So, there are pieces there, and that's why I say, they're very committed to their plan, but I also think they'll listen to things such as that are concerns. But what I would like to see us do is continue to cut the income tax. I had this conversation a little bit with Gerard. I'd like for us to look at raising the exemptions. Interestingly enough, the guy that talks funnier than I do in a British accent I think he called Chairman Lamar the Reagan of Mississippi. That was impressive. Well, one of the things that President Reagan, that happened under his leadership, was that we indexed the brackets. See, we've not raised the exemption. You want to talk about since 1982. So the first $18,300 of a single person's income is already not taxed for state tax in the state of Mississippi because of the way the brackets work. If we raise that number, then all of a sudden you've got people that are at these entry-level positions where we're trying to get people into the workforce that they will not have a state income tax on them. So I think you could cut from the top on the top rate, that you could raise the exemptions. But I do think separate and apart from that, that's the elimination of the income tax or the reduction of the income tax, is that you do look at a source for your roads and bridges, because we have to do that. Because if you're looking at economic development, and I'm just going to be honest, this historic, and I don't mean we've barely broken the record. The records have been shattered with economic development. Well, they're coming here knowing what our tax structure is. There's something they like about the state of Mississippi already, or they wouldn't be coming here. And to just opine that if we go to zero on the income tax, everybody's going to flood here like Texas, like Florida, like Tennessee. There are also major metropolitan centers in each of those states that are also a draw to people. So from a policy standpoint, do I want to tax less of your income? Certainly I do. Do I think that's a draw to the state of Mississippi? Certainly I do. The grocery tax reduction seems to have the most political appreciation. My concern is, and I'm fine for reducing the grocery tax, but I have no control over whether the price of groceries continue to go up. I'm afraid that benefit will be a little misconstrued and misunderstood because, first of all, people on SNAP benefits, they don't pay tax already, so there's no relief to them on groceries. And then everything that's in the grocery store is not grocery.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it here for today. I will ask you this. I hear more ideas, I think, coming from the Senate side. When are they going to coalesce into a bill? Do you anticipate us seeing that in the next just few days?
I hope so. I've talked with Chairman Harkins, and we've had a lot of these same conversations you and I are having. I think that deadline's in February to bring the bill out, but I think they're going to try to do that sooner rather than later. But it is on this premise that we want to continue to leave more money in the pockets of the taxpayers of the state of Mississippi, but also provide the services, the basic services, the fundamental pieces of government. Because as you said earlier, we don't know what's coming with Medicaid if it moves to a block grant. Also, we've been in federal oversight.
I hate to cut you off. We're just out of time. Senator Daniel Sparks, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, Richard.